This week, we are going to briefly discuss how people learn and the common educational theories that scientists, psychologists, and teachers look towards when using in the classroom. All of these are going to help us in understanding how people learn when they come to our museum. Education has come a long way throughout history. Not only have the studies and the people who were educated changed, so have the theories in time as well. Ancient civilizations have long since believed in education. It was a very formal process and it involved the writing process and learning how to read it, as well as early forms of math and observing the sky. The Middle Ages brought about new theories as the church was involved, so most education was centered around how you can learn by helping God in the church. Early modern education had new technologies, and many people started understanding how engineering and philosophy worked. And finally, museum education today allows us to focus on all of these things and work in all aspects of what we call STEM or STEAM. There are five theories of education that we will focus on the purpose of museums specifically. All of these theories can be used in different ways, and they are all theories that teachers usually focus on when they're learning how to actually educate their students. Behaviorism focuses on two major themes: classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning means that a stimulus is causing a positive response, and operant conditioning is that your behavior is controlled by a negative consequence. If something bad happens to you, you generally know not to repeat it. As opposed to in classical conditioning, if something good happens to you, you're going to continue to respond as long as that good thing keeps happening. In cognitivism, we think about four stages of cognitive development: sensory motor, pre operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. These are all the different parts that a child actually goes through as they are starting to learn. Sensory motor is basic actions and understanding how they think. Pre operational is working on how to have pretend play, but no logic is being formed. Concrete operational is thinking a little more rigidly and starting to gather logic, while formal operational is the final stage where the child is actually able to use deductive reasoning as they go through play. Constructivism is very important in museums. There are three major theories that we think about: anchored instruction, discovery learner, and social development theory. In anchored instruction, you're placing learning in a meaningful environment, aka you're learning like real life examples, like we are doing in this course. Discovery learner is an inquiry based learning technique done essentially meaning learn by doing. And social development theory is when certain things that are qualitative changes are happening in society that are happening because of a strong motive. Science, technology, and history are all things that can affect the way that a society thinks and develops. Humanism focuses on what we need to learn that directly affects our needs as humans. The ARCS model, or attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction, allows us to understand the general concept of hands on learning, linking to a previous connection or a previous experience, facilitating self growth within ourselves to build confidence, or allowing ourselves to get praise or rewards at the end, including our satisfaction. The hierarchy of needs by Maslow essentially is just fundamental levels of needs, starting with the physiological needs and the safety, all the way up to our current needs as a cognitive thinker. Two other major educational theories are Bloom's taxonomy and the multiple intelligences theory. Bloom's taxonomy is a description of verbs that can actually assist in the current process of how to create a program. A student must understand knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation at the end. Please look in your folder for a full sheet on different verbs representing cognitive tasks in Bloom's taxonomy. The multiple intelligence theory is something that is very important in museums as well, and you can see visual spatial, bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, linguistic, and logical mathematical are all ways that we can learn outside of the typical test taking world. Critical pedagogy is the study of education in schools, colleges, and other learning institutions from a cultural perspective. What you want to learn is what kind of culture and community that surrounds your museum, because that will affect how your programming occurs. You will want your education to first and foremost reach the community that is the real audience and the culture that surrounds you. The culture that surrounds your museum is also what affects how your museum is perceived and ingrained into the memory. Beyond learning the information, your audience must perceive it a certain way, so it is important to note that in education you have to consider people's cultural and social backgrounds. People's belief before they walk into your museum influence how they perceive and memorize your information. So it's always important to know your audience that directly surrounds your community and your museum before you even start planning programs. It is important then to know how your museum can be seen as a means of communication. Communication among your staff, with your visitors, teachers, and more all directly relate to how your museum can be seen. We don't generally think of communication as being a scientific method, but if you look at the transmission model of communication as seen in the text, The Education Role of the Museum, it lays out the communication in all aspects. The transmission model has the communicator sending a message, meaning, and stimulus to the receiver, and the effect and response is going to come from it. This seems very basic to us, but this is how every program must occur inside of a museum. You may be asking now, which educational theory should I best use for my approach? Museums strive for the most interaction possible for a visitor. They must rely on different teaching methods and have to be self guided in many senses. For this reason, we generally work with a more constructivist approach to education. This allows us to be hands on, go through the full process of communication, and create a great learning environment. Remember, interpretation is key.